5G for Business, The Rise of Wireless라는 주제로 발표해 주실 에릭슨-LG 호칸 셀벨 CEO님을 모시도록 하겠습니다.
Good morning. I am first of all very happy to be here in the 5G Vertical Summit that is hosted by MSIT and the 5G Forum. And the topic that I'm going to cover today is the rise of wireless, but I'm going to talk about this in a slightly different context, because here in Korea there's been a lot of focus on consumers in the first 1.5 years of 5G, but what's really happening now is the impact on business. So 5G for business is the topic. So before going into a little bit more of details, I think it's important to understand the potential of this and the impact of 5G could have on different industries. So what you see on this slide is actually a prediction of the revenue potential over the next 10 years that is enabled by 5G. On this slide you see a potential of $700 billion, and that's actually the market that is addressable by the operators around the world. The total revenue that is addressable for and enabled by 5G is actually 1.5 trillion. But if you take this 700 billion and you look into, okay, so where is this revenue going to come from? It's important to understand that a lot of enterprises and industries are looking into digital transformation today. And they are not doing that because there is a cool technology that 5G is available. They are looking into this because they want to see how they can be more competitive, how they can be more cost efficient, how they can secure more revenue, and how they can be more sustainable. So if you look into this prediction, and this is actually done in a research together with Arthur D. Little, you can actually see that the biggest chunk is actually coming from healthcare. That's representing over the next 10 years 21%. The second one is manufacturing, and this is the area I will be focusing on in the coming slides. Energy and utilities, automotive, and public safeties. These 5 areas are representing more or less 75% of the potential revenue over the next 10 years. So this $700 billion is actually the market by 2030. And this is a market that will be growing continuously from now up until 2030. So no one can exclude this, because if companies and enterprises are not really addressing this, they run the risk of not being competitive in their respective industry. So let's talk a little about on the rise of wireless and talk about this from a smart manufacturing perspective. So we see that wireless is for sure going to be the dominating technology over fixed over the next number of years. Today they are on a similar level, but over the next few years wireless will be much more used than fixed. And you see some numbers here which I find quite interesting, and this is really the incentive for factories or any industry having factories to really address this. First of all, the size of the smart manufacturing market by 2030 is $1 trillion. It's a huge market for anyone that would like to address this. Another interesting number is that when we talk about the number of connections, and then I'm talking about wireless connection in smart factories by 2030, would be 4.3 billion. We're talking about 4.3 billion connected devices in factories by 2030. And I will come back to some more about why wireless is the preferred technology over fixed. But one example that you can see on this slide is actually to reconfigure a factory, an automotive factory, if you have a traditional wired factory, i.e. all the devices, machines, robotics are connected with wires, would take approximately 1 year. If you have a factory that is connected with a wireless network, this complete reconfiguration would only take 2 months. So it's a huge cost saving and creating a lot of flexibility for these factories. Another example is that retail companies today, they are having robotics today. They're using it for delivery and order fulfillment. That's actually already happening today. But in order to have full flexibility going forward, they have to make sure that these robotics is connected via wireless network. So again, to create this flexibility. So this is just an introduction and some numbers on why wireless will create or play such an important role in smart factories. So let me share some more interesting numbers, and actually this is maybe the real incentive for any industry to invest in smart factories. The estimate and the prediction is that the saving of introducing wireless communication in a factory is $1 per square meter and day. That may not sound like a big number, but if you consider where the saving is coming from, one is reduced waste. Because if you are able to connect all your machines and robotics in a factory, you will be able to calibrate in tools, you will be able to service and maintain tools and robotics just in time. This means that the waste of both material and tools will be significantly reduced. I talked before about increased flexibility, and of course, flexibility is also can be calculated into a cost saving. This means that at any time a factory can readjust, rebalance a floor, which means that they can move around robotics and make efficient use of these robotics for different purposes and different tasks. And then of course, if you have a very efficient use of your factory, it also means that you can address new revenue. For example, you can make sure that the products or that you produce in the factory, they can be customized for individual customers. That means when a customer is ordering a specific product and push the button for ordering that product, the factory can start a production at that time. So these are the three main areas where the cost saving can come from, and as I said, the estimate is $1 per square meter. If you then think about what does that mean? Well, if you would take a factory of 10,000 square meters, the annual saving would be $4 million. And of course, this is just an example, because if you would have a bigger factory, then of course the cost saving would be bigger. So it's a huge potential cost saving for these factories and for these industries. So then you may ask yourself, why cellular and why dedicated networks? So you can divide these into two areas. One is if you talk about the existing market you have today and the existing factory, you may not have the connectivity or the network to cope with the data and the video traffic you need to have. The second one is that you may want to introduce additional services for your workers. That could be augmented reality, that could be for workers to real-time do remote maintenance. It could be a way for the workers to avoid the dangerous type of tasks. And then of course, in a factory you may have some existing technologies. And we all know that old technology could be fairly expensive to maintain, and in some areas may not even be possible. So those are three areas that would be reasons for you to do a modernization of your network and then going into a dedicated network. Then if you talk about the new market, well, if you want to continue to be productive as a factory or as an enterprise, the wireless and dedicated network will enable you to, as I said before, be more flexible. That means that by having an automated factory, you can actually increase your productivity, and you can also increase your quality, because you actually remove the human error part of your production. This also means that some factories and some production is also in dangerous environments, in a mine, for example. This actually means that you can improve the workers' safety and environment, because they can actually remotely control any robotics or machines that could be in a hazardous or dangerous environment. And then, of course, you can also generate new revenues and new business models. I mentioned before an example of you can actually start the production of the product when the customer is actually making a decision to buy. That means that that customer can get the perfectly customized product, exactly meeting his or her requirements. So these are a number of areas that is justifying and motivating to actually have industries both to invest in a cellular network using 5G technology, but also building a dedicated network that can be customized and utilized only for that factory. So if I talk about different type of networks, I think it's important to understand that there will be a number of different types of network going forward. What you see on this slide, you see on the x-axis, you see the size of network, and in mobile networks we talk about number of sites. So on the right hand side you see existing operator networks. They are today in the range of maybe 10,000 sites or more. You also see some public safety and rail and utility networks that would be in the range of 1,000 sites. On the y-axis, you actually see the number of networks per country. So again, if we take Korea, we talk about the operator networks. They may be in the size of 10,000 sites or more, which is the case in Korea. But it also means that there are very few networks. In Korea, there are 3. If you take public safety and radio utilities, it may be a few more networks and consequently a few number of sites that is less. But my focus now is talk about the dedicated networks or local private networks. So this could be networks that is either dedicated for big plants, which could be oil, gas, mining, ports, airports. They could be in the range of hundreds of sites. But there would also be many more networks like that, could be in the hundreds as well. And if you break it down to the upper left corner, where you actually have small networks, dedicated networks for specific factories or warehouses, then it may be networks of maybe only 10, 20 sites. But on the other hand, it would be thousands of these type of networks, because this could be one network per factory. So this is a way to actually view the different type of networks. And the reason why this is important to understand is that for a factory, it's going to be very important to have high availability and resiliency. This means that you cannot have a network that is disturbed or interrupted by other users. You need to have a network that is dedicated for the purpose of that specific factory. That also means that you need to satisfy requirements such as low latency and high throughput. Of course, security has to be guaranteed. If you're using sensitive data, could be customer data or confidential data, you need to have a network that is guaranteeing that that maintains secure and kept confidential to your particular enterprise. You also need to guarantee the quality. You cannot have a factory that is not having a guarantee in quality. So a cellular network and a dedicated network would offer advanced, what we call quality of service features. If you have a factory that you need to expand or you need to have additional capacity, it must be easy to do so, which is very much the case on a wireless network. And then of course, any enterprise or factory would like to be able to add additional services. And the reason why this is important is that you need to make sure that these networks are satisfying all these requirements. And this means that if you want to provide such a network, you need to fulfill a number of requirements. So if you're a factory, you would like to make sure that you can get the pre-packaged and pre-integrated network. you need to work together with partners that can provide you with this solution. You cannot, as an individual enterprise or factory, put together a very complex solution. So you need to have it pre-packaged. You need to make sure that this can be scaled up. Because as a factory, you may want to start with a few use cases, maybe in a part of your network, but you need to have a solution that can easily be scaled up to cover a bigger area or more capacity. It also has to be globally consistent and have common SLAs or service level agreements, because you may be a multinational company, and that means that you need to make sure that whatever solution you go for can also be coordinated and cooperated with your other sites around the world. And finally, and not least important, you need to make sure that when you go for the solution, it has to be an ecosystem available that consists of devices and applications. So whenever you want to expand your solution, you want to go for a specific solution for your needs, there should be an ecosystem of partners, devices, and solutions to pick from. So again, why cellular? I've touched on it before. Reliability and low latency is an absolute requirement. It means that you need to have dedicated and licensed spectrum, making sure that you have access to quality of service. Flexible deployment could be on-premises system, but it could also be a virtual network. Security cannot be underestimated. This has to be guaranteed, and this is based on the cellular-based security, which is already today very secure. Capacity and coverage. It has to be a solution that is covering both indoors and outdoors, and you have to be able to use different spectrum and also be able to adjust the bandwidth that may be a requirement for your particular factory. Ecosystem. Very important, because if you build a network and you build a solution today, it has to be a solution that can be used for the future and expanded, which means that it has to be future-proof and it has to be possible to make use of when the 5G technology is evolving and also evolving into future technologies. And finally, seamless mobility. It has to be possible to interoperate with also commercial network and commercial mobile network in the country. So let me just go into the last part of my presentation and again touch on the ecosystem, because I think this is really a prerequisite for this to work. So this is actually describing a bit of the ecosystem that we as Ericsson see around Industry 4.0. So you need to have a number of independent software vendors. You need to have networks, cellular networks, of course, which could come in different shapes. It could be public, it could be sliced, it could be private network, and using our solution, Industry Connect. There has to be modules, there has to be cellular gateways, there has to be devices, there has to be system integrators, and there has to be a lot of different partners to provide flexibility and opportunity and choices for the specific solution. So this slide is just showing some example, because we in Ericsson, we provide 5G technology, we predict what it's going to look like, but that's not enough. We need to make sure that this is actually working in practice. So this is the reason why we are working with 40 plus different companies around the world, different industries, in automotive, in production, in mining, and also including our own factories. Because that is the way we are learning exactly how to build these smart factory networks. So this is actually the way we understand now how the use cases can be supported in a smart factory. So let me just finish off and say that dedicated networks in a nutshell, you need to have wireless network, you need to have 5G technology to make sure that you have reliable wireless connectivity. You need to have dedicated networks in case you want to guarantee capacity and quality of your particular factory. We have today ready off-the-shelf solution to go ahead to build a smart factory type of solution. And as I said, our ecosystem is already there with a lot of hardware and software and advisory partners. So let me just finish and say that wireless is on the rise, and wireless is here to stay. And if you as an enterprise would like to be cost efficient and competitive going forward, wireless and 5G technology is the way to go. Thank you so much.
네, 발표해 주신 호칸 셀벨 에릭슨 LG 대표님께 감사합니다. 5G가 새로운 산업에 어떻게 확장에 도움이 될지, 특히 로컬 5G 또는 로컬 프라이빗 네트워크라고 하죠. 관련된 좋은 시사점을 발표해 주신 내용이었습니다.